see, this is why it has to be super authentic, which is why like I'm so bad at learning lines and stuff. I could never be an actor. Anyways, so to sum it up, we had a great conversation. This is Dr. Eric Miller. He will be back again. I hope you enjoyed yourself, and definitely inspiring person to be around. Board certified internal medicine and obesity medicine. We get to dive much more into that certainly in the future. So stick around with us, and you'll see us next time.
Thank you.
We got to keep that in there because that's just silly. It's nice to meet you.
You too, finally.
I know.
I've been told numerous times we get to meet.
I know. And
here
every
it is.
time you live here,
I do.
every time I'm here, you're not here, or you're traveling. You do travel a lot, which is super cool. Obviously, a perk of working in telehealth.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's so nice to meet you. For people who don't know, we both work for Rouget Health. And how long have you worked for Rouget?
I think 3 years.
Yeah, me too. And so it's kind of interesting in our industry that we would both be physicians working for a healthcare company, and it's a relatively small company. And as far as, members that are working there, and we haven't met yet.
Yeah.
So
Glad we finally get to.
it's funny. When we started the concept of let's create a podcast, and we were talking about how we would have you on, and of course I was like, this was months and months ago. I was like, we should meet on the podcast. And they're like, okay. And so I literally was trying to put my foot down because, things change over time and weeks and planning. And I was like, no, we're going to not see each other until the podcast. So it's great to finally meet you. I have some questions that I actually prepared just because you have a lot of experience in different things that I'm interested in, and just want to pick your brain on different things. But I guess if you want to kind of just explain a little bit about who you are to get started, and
Sure.
We'll go from there.
Cool. Originally from New York. I'm 45, which is crazy, but yeah. Been practicing since 2008. I'm dual boarded in internal medicine and obesity medicine. And my kind of path through my career in medicine has been rather unconventional.
Sure.
Yeah. It's funny, I remember when I graduated residency, the question I would get is, are you going to do inpatient or outpatient? And I was like, neither. And my first gig out of residency was I moved to Vegas, and I was a house call doctor for the Strip.
Incredible.
It was the coolest thing. I had a bag and some meds, and had a prescription. Had a pharmacy that would deliver meds.
Yeah.
And that's it, man. I would go up and down the Strip seeing patients.
So you knew during training that the typical trajectory for you was not to be kind of followed through. And I certainly relate to that. I knew actually in residency, I kind of had a little bit of a mental breakdown because I was like, this is not what I signed up for. This is not what I really wanted to do. I didn't feel like I was really making much of an impact in the system. So it sounds like that's kind of how you viewed it as well.
Exactly. And what's really cool is I did about a year of that, and then I ended up going into I did inpatient medicine first. So I was in Vegas, moved back to the East Coast, did some inpatient work, and I love the duality of life because I had to have that experience of what I feel did not work in order to kind of put me on the path that I'm on now. So I did some inpatient for several years, transitioned to outpatient, and then over time ended up where I am now, which I couldn't be more grateful for.
Yeah, I let my inpatient training end at residency. I knew it just wasn't for me. I mean, family medicine, most of us go into primary care, urgent care, outpatient. But I just really found a lot of my time was spent with administration and really very little patient-to-patient interaction in the hospital. Mm-hmm. And even now, years later, I recently had a family member who got really sick, and we went to the hospital, and we saw the doctor for like 30 seconds. And at my expense as a patient or as a family member, I was like, this is horrible. This is unacceptable. My family has no idea what's going on. But then as the provider, I'm like, he's got 80 patients to see today. Yep. So no one is winning here. And so I totally can understand.
Interesting system.
Interesting system. And hopefully we can at least be some sort of a voice to open people's minds to what is really happening in that space. When my family left the hospital, all of the anger and frustration was directed directly at the doctor, who literally had zero say in how much time he could really spend. Mm-hmm. It looks on paper and it looks physically like the doctor has plenty of time to come and sit and chat, and they're just avoiding you or trying to get to the next one as quick as possible. But to get through your day, you have to. Yep. So it's hopefully nice we can at least speak for some of us out there.
Definitely. And I realize that's kind of, there were actually, to be honest, there were years where I questioned why I became a doctor.
Yeah.
Really felt stuck, really felt disheartened. And now I realize it took me time to finally step into this space where I became a doctor so that I could have a platform to really kind of propel people in a way that I feel is the path to real wellness.
Yeah. And it sounds like, I'm sure we'll get into it, that you've really been able to do that. A lot of providers that I know, and even myself, I'm still struggling to like figure out how I can do that optimally, and really fulfill everything that I want to accomplish and all the things I want to help people with. I think medicine too, especially in primary care, there's so much to encompass in treating a patient. And to open your own like primary care office, it's like you have to see so many patients, you have to hire so much staff, you have to go into so much debt, and you really don't also get to focus on the things that you're passionate about. Primary care and internal medicine, it's such a wide scope, right? And you see patients throughout the day for all different concerns, and you just feel like you can't really make a huge difference.
Also, what about living your life?
Right, that too.
Where does that come in too? And that's what really got me. Like, that's what really got me.
We haven't even gotten there yet.
Yeah.
But absolutely, there's no time for that. And I have a good friend of mine who's actually a nurse practitioner, and he opened his own office in Orlando. And we actually both decided to open a direct primary care office at the same time. I tapped out in 6 months because I was like, I have no time. I had more time working at the urgent care. So this is how the system builds it, right? So they want to keep you in the hospital. They want to keep you at the urgent care where they pay you a salary and you go clock in and clock out because you're exhausted by the end of that. Imagine trying to do all the ins and outs of everything else. It's not possible. So then you're forced into these positions that you're miserable in, that you can't make a difference in. You have no say in any of the direction of the company or how patients are cared for. Anyways, we just got started and like...
I think this could go on for hours.
Oh, no. So we'll try to narrow the scope because clearly we're going to have to talk again multiple times over the series of this podcast. But jumping into my next question was, so started, seeing patients on the Vegas Strip, and now you are... in telehealth and doing other things, but how did you make that transition into telehealth?
That's really interesting. I'm trying to think how that happened. It was more of like something I manifested. So I started to realize early in my career that there were several things that I didn't feel resonated with me. One was the setup of the Western medical model, which I feel is fairly disempowering for the patient.
Yeah.
And secondly, like, when do I get to live my life? So I realized that I wish when I was younger, because I wanted to be a doctor since I was 4. I don't know how it got there, but it was planted in me. There's no medical people in my family. I'm the first doctor in my family, but I wanted to be a doctor since I was 4. And I realized now being older, I wish someone had asked me when I was younger what kind of life I wanted.
Right.
Not what I wanted to do. It's like I will never ask a child, what do you want to be?
Right.
I ask, what kind of life do you want?
Yeah.
Because I started to realize that there were several gaps, again, in my kind of lack of resonance with the Western model, but also like, when do I get to create freedom? When do I get to live? When do I get to do the things I want to also do and have passions outside of my career?
Right.
So that's what I started to realize. And I started to envision this life where I can create impact, but I can also create leverage and I can create freedom in my life. And it just little by little, it wasn't like I set out on this path. It was just something I manifested really. And little by little it started to happen. So first I transitioned into I worked for one platform and they had asked me, would you be okay getting licensed in this state, that state, this state? And I started to realize, And by, eventually I had 9 or 10 state licenses and I realized that was the key.
Yeah.
I realized that was the key to freedom in medicine. And I started to just gather licenses and realize that I can create more impact. I can work in multiple states rather than being locked down to one clinic, one hospital, just like providing impact for maybe a small isolated group. I now I can just like diversify my impact. That's kind of really how I describe it. And that's what I've done. And it's absolutely been amazing.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I was working at an urgent care and really unsatisfied. And it was such a shame because it was really my first experience outside of residency. I wasn't getting along with the clinic staff. I mean, I looked like 20 years old, which I still get clocked on sometimes. So the staff didn't respect me. The administration didn't respect me. And I just didn't feel happy. And so I was just trying to look for things different on the weekends. I could just substitute some of my time. And I even thought about just completely quitting and working like 1 or 2 days a week and finding some way to just make it through to survive. That way, finding some freedom. So I found a platform similar. I had 2 licenses actually in residency. I had this dream I was going to move to Hawaii one day, which is so funny because we'll talk about that later. Mm-hmm. But so I got my license in Hawaii and my license in Florida. And I worked on one platform. They said, hey, can we get you like 4 more licenses? And I was like, okay. And I didn't even really know what that meant or what implications that would have. So I started seeing more patients on that platform. And I realized I was seeing patients at home, which working at home was just much better for me. I just felt more free. And I still worked for a large organization and they were well established. So I didn't feel like it was that big of a change from the urgent care, but I was at home and I could at least feel somewhat freer than I did confined in the 4 walls of that clinic. But exactly how you mentioned the state licenses, and a lot of people will say to me, oh my God, you have 49 licenses. That was so crazy. And looking back now, I mean, I didn't do it on my own. I luckily was able to have companies help me and that I was working for at the time. But a lot of people ask, how did you do it? And what can I do to do it? And even when I renew my licenses by myself, it is a struggle. I mean, they make it very difficult financially. There's a lot of hoops you have to jump through. Did you have to do a lot of that on your own, or were you fortunate enough to have a company kind of process that for you?
So the company processed a lot of them, but then I also discovered the medical licensure compact,
Yes.
IMLCC, and that is just what a game changer.
Yeah.
For our little niche we have.
For sure. And I think really any physician that is even remotely interested in telehealth should just have that in their back pocket. It's definitely the easiest way. Certainly you have to live in a certain state or have at least an organization in a state. But what people don't know is, for example, in Florida, you can't apply for that compact agreement because it's not one of the states that you can live in. But if you form an LLC in another state, like Colorado, and you employ yourself in Colorado, virtually or remotely, you can use your LLC as the business that you work for to apply for the license. So that's what I did.
It's brilliant. That's step number one is getting that compact. Step number one.
Yes. I think too, telehealth kind of gives you some of the power to feel like you're in more control of what you're doing. It makes you learn business a little bit more. Obviously, in my training, I learned nothing about business. I mean, I don't know what your residency was like or medical school. Did you get any business training whatsoever?
Not at all.
Yeah.
Zero.
So my goal was, as a kid, when I would go to my pediatrician's office, it was very old school. He was writing paper charts. Obviously, this was many years ago. And I was like, I want to do this. He had like a nice nurse at the front. It was very bare bones, but it was kind of like my idea of what a doctor was. And that stuck through me, even through medical school. When you get in residency, you realize that all your dreams are shattered and that's not possible. But so I just knew that that's what I wanted. But even in medical school, I didn't pick up on the fact that none of those skills were taught to me. I didn't know how to even apply for a mortgage to get a space to rent out. And that should be. That's basic, right? But they don't. I say they as if there's an enemy out there trying to get us. I don't really believe that, but I do believe that the system is just not built for physicians and healthcare providers to feel like they can start on their own, like they have freedom or that they can do things themselves. It feels like as soon as you're in residency, it's all about finding another contract with another company.
Yeah. Well, again, this might be my own bias towards our education system, too, but we're taught to be employees.
Exactly.
Right. So we're taught to be employees. So we're kind of I don't know if it's purposeful, but that they withhold the education about certain things. But doctors notoriously are known to be terrible business people because we're not taught these things.
Right.
Like we're just plugged with particular types of information and we don't. So it's just, but I think it's kind of how the system is created, whether it's purposeful or not. That's how it kind of is.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, I could definitely go on and on about that as well, but we'll skip to the next question. So in your regards to, I keep hitting the mic, in your regards to how telehealth has changed just over the last few years, have you noticed anything? I mean, I definitely have. I'm not sure what your perspective is, but do you think it's changing in the right direction, in the wrong direction?
I've kind of shifted my practice. I don't really do direct patient care anymore. So, with Rugiette, we do asynchronous consultations, which I love.
Yeah.
But I don't do any direct consultations. I do a lot of collaborations with nurse practitioners on several platforms. But yes, I kind of have moved myself away from direct encounters through the telemedicine platform. For a while, I worked on several actual urgent care type platforms, and it was just not my jam. It was like doctors were fighting for patients. Mm-hmm. And it was very strange. And at some point, I was wondering if people had a bot, because there were some docs who were getting all. Yeah. It was really weird. It was like Hungry Hippo. I would describe it like doctors fighting for encounters, and
Yeah.
Just wasn't my thing.
So, and just to backtrack a little bit about what an asynchronous encounter is, basically the patients will complete a consultation via a form or a questionnaire, and then we review their medical history, their medications, all of their qualifiers to determine if the treatment is appropriate for them. Certainly asynchronous telemedicine is not appropriate for everything, but for erectile dysfunction, it works literally perfectly. I think it's probably, out of every async platform that I've used, the most optimal form to treat a patient for erectile dysfunction is asynchronous care. And then I completely agree with you in regards to some of the other platforms that I've worked on. It's interesting to me. I don't know if you've noticed this, but in telehealth, a lot of the time, companies want to make sure that they don't give a provider too much power. And by doing that, they hire as many providers as possible, and they want you to compete with each other. So you're so focused trying to fight each other over a patient, you don't realize that they've created the environment that you're in right now. They've created this hostile work environment where you're literally sitting on the clock, not getting paid unless you grab patients, but there aren't any to grab. So you're sitting there just on your computer waiting to click, click, click. We're physicians. We've been trained for 12 plus years to help treat people, and you're going to tell me I need to sit here for an hour and keep hitting refresh? It's frustrating. But I think that is where a lot of the larger platforms have gone. Obviously, more people are interested in telehealth now, so we're seeing more competition and more people getting, employed through these big platforms. Unfortunately, I wish there were more options for providers to work in telehealth independently. Create your own platform, create your own. So you have, at least in primary care and urgent care, that creates more competition. It creates more ability for providers to feel independent, especially if you're doing something so simple as what you would do at an urgent care or a clinic elsewhere. But they want to, try to prevent that in order to, keep the dollars in the corporate pockets, which this is really not my intention for this podcast.
Right.
But, you can put two telemedicine or physicians together in general. We're going to start talking about corporations at some point.
Look, I'm grateful for freedom.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for...
And I think we're both fortunate enough to work with Rougette, where we've been here, to see them evolve. They've evolved with us. They really appreciate our feedback. And I think that a lot of their success is because of the happiness in everyone in the company. We're all happy to be here. We love our patients. We love what we do. And in comparison to other places I've worked, where they're like, why are our feedback scores so low? Why are our patients unhappy? Why are we losing patients? Because the providers are unhappy. How am I going to practice good medicine and be happy to contribute in this environment when you're making me miserable? Mm-hmm. And then they just fire you and get a new one who is then going to be miserable too, get a new one, and then eventually they run out, and then you just keep seeing their ads on ZipRecruiter and Indeed looking for new.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're expendable.
Yeah.
And I remember years ago, I was doing an outpatient gig, and I remember my supervisor constantly riding me, just constant negative feedback, and I literally went to his office one day, and he was an old-timer, and I said, is there any place for acknowledgement? And he said, if you're looking, I remember these words, quote, he said, if you're looking for acknowledgement, you're in the wrong career.
Can you believe?
And and that really stuck with me and that's what's different about platforms like Rougette.
Right.
You get acknowledged there. It's people are personable. There's connection. There's relationship. It's not just you're an expendable cog in the wheel.
Right.
Completely different. And that's what makes the difference between a career and a job.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And that mentality in those large telehealth corporations is not just for providers, it's for patients too. Mm-hmm. Their patients are expendable. Mm-hmm. Too much drama with a patient, kick them out. We're not going to deal with it. This is your issue, whatever. Here, it's totally different. Mm-hmm. I've never seen customer support take as much leap and bounds to get in touch with me, to help a patient, to find a prescription, to make sure it's getting to them on time, if they need something overnighted, if they need something adjusted. We are all hands on deck, and it's a team effort. It's just completely different than, at least when I'm in another company, which is why I don't work at those other companies anymore.
Well, it's brilliant also because you realize that these patients, obviously they're men,
right,
are coming to us in a very vulnerable state.
Yes.
I remember when I worked outpatient and erectile dysfunction came up, it was as they were walking out the door, it was kind of like, hush, hush, hey, Doc, right, by the way, I'm having this,
Yes.
But so patients come to us in Rougette and they're vulnerable. So yes, treat them like people, understand that, be conscious of that.
Yep.
And that's what we do. And that's what, again, sets this apart than working in a corporate gig, which, never do again.
Yeah, I'm on my way there. I'm still employed.
I'm grateful.
But, you know, yeah, it's definitely a dream, and that's why you inspire me so much. Even though we haven't met, I've read some articles about you that, you know, the team has shared with me.
Thank
And
you.
you obviously are, in my opinion, a great vision for someone in their 40s. You look incredible. I'm
Thanks.
sure you hear it all the time. I hear it too, that I look good for my age, so I'm hoping to keep it in my 40s. But yeah, so as far as how you live your life in medicine, you know, we've already talked about how it's important that you're able to have your personal time and your personal life. Like, how did you make that transition? Did you decide, I'm just going to stop working at this place on this day and I'm going to start focusing more on me? Or was it like a transition period?
Yeah, I think I started gathering licenses, and then I saw that there was a niche where, look, there are lots of medical businesses, and every medical business of some sort needs a medical director. And I started to realize that there were lots of ads on like Indeed and all these other platforms looking for medical directors constantly. And then I started looking for like virtual medical directors, and I realized there's a lot of opportunity, and that's what I started to transition to.
Yeah.
I realized that I could bring value to things that I feel, you know, resonate with, things like Rougiette.
Right.
And that's what I started to do. I started to pick up these medical director gigs, and I started to pick up nurse practitioner collaboration gigs. And that's really what I do now. I'm a professional medical director to some degree. I consider myself either a medical hustler or medical entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Because that's really what resonates with me, to create value and impact while also creating freedom and leverage in my life.
Absolutely.
We get to have both. I think there used to be this belief that doctors were purely here for service. And I think it's beautiful, great, yes, and we also get to live our lives. It's one life, and there's a lot of beautiful things we get to experience, and I choose both.
Yeah. I think it's also really interesting that the idea of a doctor being a person of complete service, that really, I think, was adopted back when a doctor could be their own business person, their own brand, their own clinic, their own company, their own business, you know? I think if I had my own shingle, my own clinic that I ran completely, and it was possible for one person as a physician to run, I think I would feel much more inclined to be devoted to service, because you can manage it. It's impossible now. You can't, you don't have the time, you don't have the weekends, you don't have any moment to yourself if you're trying to be your own business, because there are so many restrictions with Medicare, with Medicaid, with insurance, with your administration, with making sure all of those I's are dotted and T's are crossed. It's impossible to be a complete devotee to servicing patients and still function as a human being. It's not even just taking time for yourself. It's like having a moment to breathe, you know? And so I definitely think that in order to be successful and to have time for yourself, you in some ways do have to hustle your career. You know, you have to figure out, you know, what works for me, how I can be the most efficient. I think in telehealth too, that's something I learned. The more efficient you are, the more time you have with your family, the more time you have with your friends, and the more time you can devote to your patients, all because you're just being efficient. And so,
yeah, working smarter, not harder.
I know. I think you can apply that anywhere.
Of course. Absolutely. I agree.
Are you married?
No.
No.
It's my Aura ring.
Oh, it helps you with the sleep, right?
Yeah, sleep tracker.
Have you noticed like a
Yeah, 'cause my sleep was a mess, and now I can actually see it improve. 'Cause I'm making adjustments.
Yeah, I'm honestly so excited to meet you. I feel like we have a lot. I feel like today's been awesome. I'm so happy.
It's a great first start.
Yeah.
You know, how old are you?
I'm 32.
Okay. You look
Yeah.
like you're 22.
You look like you're 32.
I appreciate it. I take it. The beard will hopefully make me, this is new, so hopefully it'll
I
add
like
a little
it.
bit. Thanks, it's new. Yeah, I'm going to give it a shot. I've tried before and always end up annoying the crap out of me, and I shave it.
I don't have like, my facial hair grows like a cat, kind of like whiskers. So I actually get laser hair removal on my face.
Really?
Because
I used to my body with that.
Do you?
I did one session. I cannot believe what a difference it made in
You've
one
done
session.
one session?
No, just the back and chest. Arms I shaved. But like, I could not, one session, and it's like,
Yeah.
crazy what a difference it is already.
It also makes a huge difference on your hyperpigmentation, at least for me, because there's a little IPL in the laser that they use. So I have a lot of blotchy skin, a lot of rosacea kind of spread out everywhere. And so it's made a big difference because I get lasered pretty much everywhere too.
Yeah. I couldn't believe how easy it was.
Yeah.
I don't know why I didn't do this years ago. 45. Why did I wait so long?
It's so funny. The first credit line I ever pulled was at a company called Ideal Image, where they do laser hair removal. I was
Ideal Image, I know that.
18 years old. I walked in. They're like, "You have no credit? Fine, we'll give you some."
Cool.
And I started lasering at 18.
Wow. Well, I got a place now. It's like forever. It's like lifetime.
Yeah. So Ideal does that too, but they this is not a sponsored ad by them because I do not recommend them, but they are very expensive and I can never get an appointment.
Oh.
Like they'll have an appointment for 6 weeks and then I'll like have to change and then they'll be like, sorry, the next one's in 12 weeks. I'm like, you already got all my money.
Yeah.
So now they don't want to give me my service. But anywho.
Yeah, sure.
I guess we're back from the break.
We're back.
We're back. So we were previously talking about, we talked about a little bit of our medical licensing journey. We talked about, where did we end?
It's a great
We
question.
didn't really take a break. We just kept talking because we're just so happy to meet each other.
That's right.
But so I guess I wanted to touch back on, I get a lot of questions about people asking, what is 49 state licenses like and how did you get that? And so going back to pre-pandemic days, I don't know if this is when you started getting your licenses, but in my opinion, based on the companies I worked with, they were able to get my licenses relatively quickly. I sat down with an agent one day. She brought me like 45 mortgages, literally with multiple pages that I signed over and over again into my fingerprints. Luckily, she made this process super easy for me, and my licenses came pretty quickly. I had it wasn't 49 at that time. I had actually about like 38, and then I started getting them little by little throughout the pandemic. But for me, even after the pandemic, as I've gotten the last few, it's gotten a lot more complicated. I don't know if you've tried to apply for licenses recently, but it was...
I haven't, and the reason being, I'm like now I'm getting to the point where I realize the more licenses you have, some states you have to get verification from each individual state, and as you compile this, like you have so many, like I have 22, and
Yes.
So I've been asked recently to get California, and I'm like, I guess like I'm like intimidated about getting into the application because it's a process, man.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I realized too. So I think a bulk of why it was so easy is I was applying for all of them at the same time. So there was no license verification from each state.
Oh.
So I was submitting them all at the same, not having the others at the time. And as they would trickle in, I didn't have to provide that license verification because I didn't have them yet. So I think that you actually hit the nail on the head there. The most difficult part now is if you were to go apply for another license like California or Massachusetts, you have to get all 40 plus of your licenses to be verified from those states, which costs a fee and is a paper trail and is difficult because you're dealing with individuals who are doing this in different organizations. So why can't we just have one like federal license? I don't understand.
Come on, you really know the answer to that question.
I want them. Why do you think?
I mean, I know.
We know. Money.
Exactly. It's a racket.
I know. It's sad. But I think a lot of people don't realize how much being a physician we get taken advantage of. As far as even the early days of applying for medical school, an application is sometimes $1,000 to apply for school, and you're probably not going to get in. That's just the reality. That's the roll of the dice. They get thousands of applicants and they have less than 100 spots. So they're already making money off of us before we even get into the medical school door. And when we bring it up, we are greedy. We are asking for too much. We are just about making money. My favorite thing to also recently do is to read articles about physicians who get in trouble. Notice that if you have ever read them, they demonize the doctor so quickly. But if a healthcare company does the same thing, an example being Cerebral, who has been prescribing controlled substances like Adderall to thousands of patients all over the country illegally because the DEA does not permit that, the FDA does not permit that without an in-person evaluation for many states. They are still continuing to do it. If this was one provider or a group of providers, they would probably be in jail, right? Because it's so easy to demonize a physician because they're a person. But when you have a corporation, they can get away with a lot. Again, this was not the topic I wanted to talk about today. But I was just told that I could really go for it, so I'm going for it.
Cool, let's do it.
I'm going to get back to you because you have a lot more to share. So currently, you're obviously doing telehealth, but you have a lot of things going on. What are some of your current passions and projects that you're really excited to be part of?
Yeah, the big one is I'm medical director for a psychedelic center here in Austin.
Sure.
Called Within. And it's been amazing to watch that flourish, and it's been amazing to kind of be involved in this, I think, what's going to be the next revolution in medicine, evolve above ground. Psychedelics obviously have been around since 60s, 70s, but and been utilized, below the surface, and now it's starting to come above ground, and it's really just unbelievable And I'm so grateful to be a part of that because these things work, and so it's something I'm really passionate about.
So moving into an industry or an area of medicine that is considered unconventional, how did you navigate that process? And there's not obviously a lot of support for people who are interested in these, I don't even want to say alternative therapies because they're not. Mm-hmm. That's how they want to be classified because many different reasons, but the main one being that it's not owned by a corporation. You can't slap a fancy branded pharmaceutical label on it because it's a generic. So we have to call it an alternative therapy. How do you navigate moving into that as a physician who's never had experience doing something like that before?
For me, it's a question of whether it works.
Right.
Because a lot of what I spend time as a physician doing, as you know, and part of the reason why I got so frustrated is a lot of what we do, I'd say maybe 98% of what we do is just band-aiding.
Right.
And psychedelics work.
Right.
They change people's lives. They really create shifts. They help to untangle trauma. So they work. And so for me, that's all I need to know. And if I get looked at, sideways, if people think I'm strange, if my colleagues disagree, it's really irrelevant to me.
Yeah.
It works.
Right.
And I've been looking for things that work. And that's been a quest of mine over 14, 15 years since I've been practicing, is what works. Because a lot of what we do does not work.
Sure, definitely. Can you walk me through what it is like for a new patient at the clinic? Like if they're interested or if, and I mean, even backtrack a little bit further, like who qualifies or who would be an ideal patient?
For the most part, we're treating patients who have treatment-resistant depression, PTSD, anxiety. At our clinic, where we haven't started implementing this, but it is being found that certain eating disorders, we do support with addictions as well.
Right.
There's a long laundry list of patients who benefit, predominantly in the mental health space.
Right.
But for me, if we can help people with their mental health, we can absolutely gain ground in their physical health because it's all connected. And that's what I think one of the things that really bothers me about the Western medical model is that it does not take into account energy, spirituality, emotional component. These things matter. We are one whole unit, and to kind of just focus on certain specific areas is a disservice. And that is one thing. That's one of the reasons why I, for the most part, I've left traditional practice behind.
Right. So as someone who experiences anxiety from time to time, I'm a young gay male from the South. I have plenty of trauma to spread anywhere. If I was a patient or if I wanted to become a patient, what would that process be like?
Yeah, so usually an inquiry through our website, and then you get connected with an intake person that set up a phone call, brief kind of screening, just determining exactly what you're looking for. Is this a proper fit? And then all our consultations are done by our nurse practitioner. And then if everything goes well, they get connected with either a therapist or psychedelic guide for kind of like a prelim session.
Sure.
And then if all goes well, they can get set up to do what we're using right now is ketamine. Ketamine is the only legal psychedelic we have.
Right.
With others, on the horizon, hopefully very, very, very soon. But they get set up for their session, and it's beautiful. They're there's somebody sitting with them the entire session. They're monitored. We provide a really tranquil, beautiful environment, music, like a choreographed playlist. We actually use these beds. They're called vibe beds, so it's pretty amazing. So while you're in your experience, there's actually some vibration and feedback that correlates with the music you're listening to. It's really fabulous.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, but the results we're having, it's amazing.
Right.
It's amazing to watch people's lives transform.
Yeah, the clinical data is overflowing with positivity, which is so interesting because we still consider this an alternative therapy when some data is showing that it is superior to SSRIs, is superior to cognitive behavioral therapy, is superior to really what the traditional route would take a patient through, an expensive route, a time, I don't want to say time wasting, a heavy amount of time that they have to spend usually in treatment through medication, therapy. I've read as early as maybe a few visits, some patients can feel completely better and have complete resolution of some of their symptoms. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah. Yes, some of the psychedelics have been shown to work. What's really interesting is they work very similar to SSRIs, almost the exact same binding site, but whereas SSRIs have been shown to only help us cope,
Right.
which obviously is not healing. Psychedelics have been shown to actually promote healing.
Wow.
So, and that's what we're really trying to do in healthcare. We're not looking just to cope. Coping is not good enough, and that's really where I think we've been for decades, and it's not good enough. So we really need to shift into healing, and that's what we're talking about now. In the psychedelic realm, is healing versus coping.
Sure. And for those who don't know, SSRIs are the basic, medications you'd be prescribed for depression or anxiety, like sertraline, the generic form of Zoloft, or Prozac, which is has a generic form, fluoxetine, I think.
Yeah.
It's a quiz question. But yeah, so as far as psychedelics, obviously this is a big topic for a lot of people. People use them recreationally. Have you heard any data or heard anything about how psychedelics can be used in sexual health or relationships? Anything along
Yeah,
those
absolutely.
lines?
So MDMA, initially, that's what it was used for. MDMA was used in couples therapy.
Wow.
It creates a kind of sense of empathy. It creates connection. People kind of regard themselves and others in a more loving, more gentle manner. So absolutely, that's where MDMA was started. And what's so cool is these meds, people now think they're street meds, and they are, or street drugs. But these meds started with really beautiful clinical results, and
Right.
again, not getting into details, but they were shut down and became street drugs, and are now making kind of this evolution, which I'm grateful for. But yes, specifically for sexual health or relationship health, MDMA is remarkable.
It's interesting how you can have a medication that's beneficial to people, and the more you limit it, the more you find it available on the street.
Yeah, because people will find a way.
People will.
Want to live better quality lives.
Right.
And yeah, you can utilize these things recreationally. And is there a place for that? Sure, why not? But the clinical use is, again, it's for me and for what we're seeing far exceeds what we currently utilize.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
especially like talking about the recovery space. Do you know the statistics on AA? Really, really bleak.
Yeah.
Like the relapse rate for alcoholics going to AA is like 95%.
Yeah.
Right. So, and there have been studies, I believe, that using certain psychedelics can drop that to 50%.
Wow.
It's a huge change.
I have a very limited, perception of AA in regards to what we learned through training, but I had a personal experience as my stepdad was a heavy alcoholic, and just watching him interact with my mom and watching him interact with me and throughout his life, some of the difficulties he had, AA was really beneficial for him in regards to helping him stop drinking, but it did nothing for his mental health conditions. It did nothing for his other issues that were really the cause of the alcoholism, And so I definitely think AA is important, and people find a lot of help there. But, always remembering that there is more to it. A lot of times people who are going to AA, they're able to stop their alcoholism, but what is the root cause of that? And getting to that, it sounds like this is something that, at least speaking with a doctor, having some sort of treatment plan is obviously important with AA, but this could be an alternative to add to something like a counseling, organization like AA, seeking something that might help get them addressed with the trauma, address the actual issue that's resulting with their.
Yeah, well, right. There's exactly my biggest concern with the healthcare system.
Right.
The problem's not the problem.
Right.
So what's the root? How do we get to the root? We have to get to the root, because otherwise it's a Band-Aid. If we don't know the root, we can't solve the problem. We can cover it, we can cope with it,
Sure.
but we have to get to the root. So I completely agree with that. And that's really what a lot of these psychedelic treatments are starting to uncover.
Yeah. And I literally cannot pronounce this word right. Psilocybin?
Psilocybin.
Yes. Do you know much about it?
Yeah, I know a lot about it.
I'm actually just kind of learning a little bit about it. This is super random, but a company on Instagram that actually creates gummies, and they're really big I think they're in Oregon or Washington, but they reach out to a lot of people, I guess, and they send them free products.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it's legal. It doesn't sound legal, but they are a very legit looking company. I'm not going to say their name in case they don't want me to say their name, but I tried a couple, and it's supposed to be microdosing. I didn't really feel anything. However, I've used marijuana in the past, and I feel things from marijuana, so I was kind of anticipating a similar reaction, and I didn't really feel anything, so maybe it was too low of a dose, but I'm still really interested, but I don't know how to safely, proceed with that. I don't necessarily think we should advise people to do that.
No, but I'd love to address that, though.
But I would love to hear your thoughts on psilocybin, and is there a benefit there? What you know? I think you have probably a lot more knowledge than I do.
Yeah, so there's microdosing psilocybin, and then there's doing like a macrodose or a trip.
Right.
Very, very different. So microdosing, you should not feel anything. So the fact that you didn't feel anything,
it worked.
Yeah, so it should be imperceivable.
Right.
So what microdosing is, it's taking a very small amount of psilocybin every day, or not every day. There are certain protocols. There's varying different protocols. But for instance, I have microdosed in the past, and here's what my experience was. The first few weeks, I felt absolutely nothing, which you shouldn't. So it wasn't until I started journaling and realizing, hey, I really can't remember the last time I felt anxious since I started this. Or I realized when I was reading, so I love to read. I read every day. I could read, like, speed read with full retention, whereas in the past I would read like a page and be like, what did I just read? Right. So my concentration, my focus was so sharp. Wow. I was sleeping better. I guess overall my mood was just more elevated. So it's subtle, almost like you have to really sit into your day to day. It's not something you're going to walk around and feel different. And that's the beauty of microdosing. It just, over time, you create kind of a bond with this fungus. Right. And it just improves the quality of life on a very subtle level. So that's really what true microdosing should be. Right.
Interesting. Yeah, that definitely makes more sense to me now. I have tried marijuana for anxiety, which it has helped. It does help in some instances, but the problem that I experience when I've ever used THC is you don't really know what journey you're going on. It's really about kind of how I've felt that day. If I'm super anxious in some instances, it makes me super relaxed. And it could be the same strain or the same whatever, and I could take it the next day and have a different type of anxiety or something else that's causing anxiety, and I'm having a completely different reaction. So I guess I kind of experienced that as a hallucinogen or a psychedelic, so I expected something similar with psilocybin, but now I'm eager to sort of retry it and see, because again, I didn't feel like I couldn't function. I felt actually completely fine, and so maybe after a few days, or do you know like how long it typically takes for people to feel or notice?
It just depends. It really just depends. But again, it's imperceivable. It really takes getting really present with yourself and just looking back at the last week or two. But I think a few weeks, probably 2 weeks, is probably an ideal time. But you should just notice kind of an overall elevation in your mood and an overall kind of better quality of life. And that's what it was for me. And I know lots of people who have implemented that in their lives, and it's something I'm actually passionate about as well.
Yeah, and it's legal now in Oregon?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. So if you're in Oregon, in Canada, then this is something you can do. If not, we do not endorse illegal things. So,
no. But it is coming.
It is coming.
It is coming.
And this really is meant to provide education, so people are aware that it is coming, and maybe they'll look at us as some sort of resource, and we would be happy to answer questions if either of us get them in our DMs or wherever we get messaged after this podcast is released.
Yeah, I'm a member of I think the Psychedelic Medical Association. So
I would love to, after this, get more involved and learn more, because it's definitely my area of interest as well. So
this is, I believe, the next revolution. This is the revolution in healthcare.
For sure.
That's my absolute belief.
I don't know if you've seen, there's a documentary on Netflix about mushrooms and fungi and how important it is. And
Fantastic Fungi, that one?
Yes.
I have not seen it, but there was a book that I read that really is what spurred my interest for the most part in psychedelics, called How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan. Oh. And there was a 4-part Netflix series by the same name.
Oh.
The series was cool, but the book was like mind-blowing. Blew my mind. It talks about the science, talks about this research, talks about how things were suppressed by the government. It's a remarkable book.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of fear, right? The government and any administrative body wants to keep us safe. and sometimes, that fear results in, withholding information. And so, it's, I think, just about really trying to allow the public to have access to information, to make their own sound decisions. Talk to your physician, talk to your provider. If you don't trust your physician, you probably need a new one. Mm-hmm. So talk to a physician that you do trust. That's what we're here to do. And if your physician isn't passionate about those topics, find one who is. I mean, you're available, and there are plenty of other physicians in other states and other cities that, have passion in regarding alternatives to what's talked about more commonly.
I mean, my personal opinion, if you're a doctor, or if you are a doctor and you are closed off to what's coming, there's a problem.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that is kind of the old school way of thought, though, like in medicine. Before telehealth, even in 2018, my perception of medicine was everything moves at an archaic pace. That changed a little bit for me with telemedicine, because it has really catapulted where telehealth has gone in those years. But still, like you mentioned, I think the unfortunate reason things come to light a lot of times is it becomes a startup. It becomes a giant corporation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can change that by educating more providers to be more comfortable, to feel, sound independently, and to take, responsibility as a physician to learn what we can offer patients instead of waiting for someone else to do it, and charging people more than they need to be charged.
Absolutely agree.
I think a lot of physicians have kind of felt that right now, especially just with the pandemic and how therapies have been explained differently, and there's been a lot of confusion. And so I think we have kind of gotten some more intense responses to our points of view recently than ever before. And for me personally, I think every physician has the ability to make their own decisions. We're all human beings and we have different philosophies, different lifestyles. If your provider is not feeding you, if that's not the right provider for you, I think it's very easy, in my opinion, to find a new one instead of being abrasive in response. But again, our system is built to where this is your PCP as designated by your insurance, so you don't even get the choice, right? So you feel like you have to be abrasive if there's not a good relationship there. So heading back to what you wanted to talk about in regards to how you approach wellness, and I'm sure, as I have received some negative feedback. But what is your point of view, and how would you kind of describe your views there?
Yeah, I mean, technology is great, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, there's new technology being created every day, but I think medicine's getting overly complicated. There's so many expensive tests, and you can order this and order that. It's just like, and it's kind of, patients have been geared now to just, when they go to their doctor, okay, what is he going to order?
Right.
What are they going to prescribe? Like, that's it. Like, it's almost like this game of, but for me, I think it's really simple. I think it's really simple, and I think, again, it frustrates a lot of people. Like, even like friends will call me or message me. They have a kind of symptom they want to discuss, because really, here's my belief on how the body works and how medicine could really ideally be tailored. And that's, the body is constantly speaking to us, constantly. Symptoms are just our body speaking to us, and it's either telling us one of two things. It's telling us either we're doing something it does not like, or we are not giving it something or doing something it needs, and that's it. That's what I believe. So when someone wants to know what they should do next, or for me, it's not what test can we order, what can I prescribe, it's what can we change?
Yeah.
What can we change, right? And it puts the power back in the patient, and that's really what frustrates me with Western medicine, is that the power is not in the patient. The patients give over their power. They disempower themselves. They walk in the room and they say, fix me.
Right.
Right? Whip out your pad and fix me.
Right.
And that's not how we heal. We heal through our choices.
Right.
Right? We heal by listening to what our body is saying to us and making adjustments. So what can we change? That's always what I'm going to ask people. What can we change? And I ask the basics. What are you eating? What are you drinking? How's your stress level? How's your sleep? What can we change? What of those 4 basic things can we really look at changing? Does that take care of everything? Of course not.
Right.
But I'd say 97%, around there of chronic illness is not listening to our bodies speaking.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure. I think too, a lot of people, even myself as a patient in many ways, I view my provider as someone I'm having a transaction with, instead of a counseling session or a mentor, someone who's helping me, guide me to better health. I think I paid this much money. This is what my preconceived notion is of what I deserve when I'm in this visit. If I don't get it, then the transaction was one way. I didn't get what I wanted, and I'm having a negative experience. And that is really, I think, been programmed in our heads because it's come, test, prescribe, leave. That's the format, that's the formula, and that's just not working.
Yep.
It's not helping people. It's making people sicker. It's making people more reliant on medication. And like you mentioned, medication is necessary for many concerns, but many can be addressed with the self, with just self-awareness, understanding my body is speaking to me, understand that we're also speaking to our bodies. I think that's something else I'd love to talk about more, is all the cells in our body are listening to us all day. Constantly. When you say I'm anxious, when you say I'm nervous, when you say I'm stressed, I don't feel good, this is wrong, your body's listening and responding just like it's trying to talk to you, and sometimes we just don't listen and respond like we should.
Well, even that phrase you said, I am, again, we're getting spiritual now, but that phrase, I am, when you say I am something, you're speaking powerful words to the universe. Again, this might be a little woo-woo, but yeah, when you say I am anxious, I am this, Your body is, I agree. It's listening, and it's creating, and we produce we have a pharmacy within us, and our body will
Yes.
create chemicals depending on the environment we provide. And that's spiritually, that's psychologically, that's physiologically. It's going to create a chemical environment to match that environment that we create. We create,
Right.
for the most part.
Yeah. I think too, people want to sometimes, even myself, when I'm sick, want to take the responsibility out of my own hands. Going to the doctor feels like I'm putting responsibility on someone else for my sickness, for my illness. And granted, when you're not well, when you're sick, we also are very vulnerable, and people do not like to be vulnerable. They want, in me personally, when I'm vulnerable, my first response is, fear and protection, right? And so I go to the doctor expecting them to take care of all my problems. I'm scared and I'm trying to protect myself. So when I don't hear what I want to hear, those are my two thoughts, and that's what I'm going to put on my doctor. And it just really damages the relationship. And I think a lot of people don't also think about the relationship that they're building with their doctor. They don't have time to even think of a relationship with their doctor. They're seeing them for a very short period of time, oftenly. But also, they don't see it as a relationship. They see it as a transaction. I don't know if you've experienced similar.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I think a lot of patients see the doctor as the gatekeeper to yes or no.
Yes.
Like, this is what I want. Either you're going to say yes or no, and
Yes.
it's like a parental transaction. I think it's a perfect way of saying it.
Yeah.
And that's not the art of medicine. And the art of medicine, sadly, for the most part, is dwindling.
Yeah, that is the interesting thing too. I think a lot of, even me as a provider, I often forget this is an art. I do have a say. I have a style. I have a format. I have a way of practicing that, again, it's not necessarily for everyone. We all respond differently to different people in different relationships. Having a physician is a relationship. If it's not feeding you, you need to find another one. Find a personality that you bounce with. Find a personality or a method of care that aligns with your beliefs. And so, that's kind of where I have had difficulty too with what we do, is learning how to still be myself and still be passionate about the things that maybe are not as popular or as common, like trying to avoid medication when necessary, trying to encourage patients to have a better diet, to focus on their exercise. But they hear it also everywhere, work out more. Okay, well, what does that mean exactly? I already work out. I work all day and I'm on my feet all day. That's my exercise. Or I already eat well. I only eat fast food twice a week. In everyone's mind, that can be enough. And for some people it is, but for me, it's not. I can't eat fast food at all. I feel horrible. I can't skip a day of exercise. I can tell. My body is responding to me, telling me, you missed that day of exercise, and I know. And I'm anxious, I'm stressed, I'm not sleeping well because your routine is disrupted. Are you a big believer in routine? Do you think that's
100%.
important?
I think consistency, and more and more recently I've had this discussion with people, consistency I think is the key to everything. I think
Yes.
if we were to make like a list of character traits that really define success versus people who maybe struggle, consistency. I mean, granted, you could be consistent in poor choices, but obviously consistent in choices that align with our greater goals.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you feel like, for me, creating a routine is a struggle? It's something that I have to consciously remind myself on a daily basis when I'm adding something or removing something. Do you find that struggle? And do you think patients should be aware that this is work? It's not something that you're going to wake up one day and say, I'm going to start walking 30 minutes a day and it's just going to happen, right? There's work to be done.
Slow.
Yes.
So I as I mentioned, I'm board certified in obesity medicine. I used to have my own medical weight loss practice years ago. And I always recommend slow. Like, let's start basic. Like, what are you drinking? Do you drink soda? Great. Let's take that out. Do you drink juice? Let's take that out. Let's start really simple. And look, I love personal trainers, like a lot of respect for personal trainers, but what always really concerned me about that is that they will take someone and they say, all right, tomorrow we're going to start you on a full food plan. We're going to get you in the gym. We're going to do all this at once. And you throw too much change at a person, they're gone. They're gone. So the best way to start implementing new habits is to go really, really slow and be kind to yourself, be gentle with yourself. But start slow and start simple, and then move, and then build upon that.
Right. I think that's definitely great advice. And kind of to end and sum up like what we're talking about today with building routines and focusing a lot on how to you can really help yourself be your healthiest self. A lot of people recently have been reaching out to me because I've lost some weight, and I've been posting a lot more about things that I eat because I'm much more conscious about what I eat now. A year ago, actually, it's January, the beginning of last year, 2022, I was with my partner and we were eating a dozen donuts a night, every single night. And I was about 190 pounds, but I felt muscular. I work out a lot. So it was kind of hidden, the fat was kind of in my face and in, around my abs ish. And I just realized at that point that I had a problem, like an actual problem. Like I literally looked at my partner and said, I can't stop eating donuts. And I know it sounds comical because it is, but I literally every night, that was my reward. I had a long day. I would go to the gym for an hour or two. And that was my reward at the end of the day, is 12 donuts. And I was concerned about how I was going to change this habit. And so we started making small adjustments. So I went from donuts to 12 to 6, and then from 6 to 2 to a bowl of cereal without cow's milk and almond milk instead. And then I would just do granola, those little adjustments. And I didn't even realize what I was really doing, but I was just consciously trying to make small changes. And then by, mid that year, I was like, actually, I can make massive changes if I just let them happen over time. So we started to eat less processed foods. And then by September, I decided I wanted to just kind of go off meat for a little while, maybe like a couple months, just all produce, which for some people is very extreme. And I don't necessarily think that's the healthiest diet for everyone, but I wanted to try it to see how I felt. I lost like 20 pounds in 2 months, but I only ate produce that did not come from a bag. We literally were going to the grocery store like every 4 days, and it takes a lot of planning. If I told someone who walked into our office, I want to lose 20 pounds in 2 months, and I said what I did, it's unattainable, impossible. It's a diet. And to me, diets never work. And so it's more about that lifestyle modification and then learning what you can do with yourself and how you can eat smart. So now I know I can cut out meat if I want to. I can just eat produce if I want to. And along the way, we, cut out sodas, things that were adding small calories, even olive oil. I used to douse my vegetables in tons of olive oil. There's a ton of calories in olive oil. So little small changes, can make a big impact, and just those adjustments to your routine. But for patients who are right now at the beginning of the year trying to figure out, how do they navigate a healthier lifestyle for themselves, do you have any advice you would give just, I guess, in general?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Small hinges swing big doors. So
Yeah.
small hinges swing big doors.
Yeah.
But it's really getting clear. I think everything is based on our priorities. So getting really clear if what you want long term is greater than what you want right now.
Yeah.
Just getting really clear with that too, because everything's a mindset, right? So getting really clear with, do you really want the goals you say you want? And if so, start making very, very small things, very, very small adjustments. We are our habits. We are our health. Our results in life are a result of our habits.
Yep.
So just start creating, but it's got to be it's got to be small.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be grand, because that's a setup for failure. I
agree. And I think, I come from a long line of negativity in my upbringing and just self-deprecation. I think we all can relate to that. And so just reminding yourself what you can do. So many of my patients confront me with, I can't, I won't, I can't do it, it's not possible. And I don't understand how you can more simply say that you can literally do anything. You are in control of your entire body, your entire health. It just takes those affirmations. It takes that prayer, whatever you want to call it, spirituality. Your body's listening. So whether you're praying to God, your body's listening. If you're praying to the universe, your body's listening. If you're praying to your body, if you're talking to yourself, if you're meditating, your body's listening. And that is the spirituality. That is the power. So just tell yourself you can do it. And stop labeling yourself, right? Like people hate when they're getting restricted by society or by government, right? Right.
How many of these things are self-imposed?
Yes.
We label ourselves constantly. I'm not this. I'm not that. I can't do this. I can't do that. That's a self-constructed prison. Yeah, and some people are really comfortable there. They feel safe there, and the problem is that it just leads them nowhere. It leads them into misery. But hopefully, people eventually, crack the code. It definitely took a while for me to figure out how I could,
at least be on this journey towards my best self. I don't think we ever really get there, but I certainly think you are on your journey. I'm on my journey. Hopefully people get at least some information and inspiration from us. But we're not here to definitely lecture anyone. We don't want to impose our beliefs on other people. It's really just about, providing advice for people on what's worked for us, and maybe it will work for them, maybe it won't, but I definitely think it's worth trying, and it doesn't cost anything.
Correct.
So I think we're out of time for today, but I'm a little obsessed with you. So we're definitely going to have more sessions together, and I'm really excited to have finally met you. I think we have so much in common, and I think we're going to also, beyond the podcast, get to hang out more and get to know each other more, have some fun, and get to share that with everybody out there listening or watching. But this has been a lot of fun. We hope you guys enjoyed it as well, and we'll see you next time. You guess you'll hear us next time? How does this work? That's it. We'll see you next time. Bye.